The Braver Angel's Way. We state our views freely and fully without fear. We treat people who disagree with us with honesty, dignity, and respect. We welcome opportunities to engage those with whom we disagree. We believe all of us have blind spots, and none of us are not worth talking to. We seek to disagree accurately, avoiding exaggeration and stereotypes. We look for common ground where it exists, and, if possible, find ways to work together. We believe that in disagreements, both sides share and learn. In Braver Angels, neither side is teaching the other, nor giving feedback on how to think or say things differently. And that is the Braver Angel's way.
Thank you, sir. Jazz hands, yeah. I see some. Excellent. All right. With that, we will call this debate to order on resolved, we can trust U.S. elections. And so I'd like to start with an affirmative speech from Ms. Lena. Go ahead and unmute. You have 4 minutes.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Lena Ng. I am an evangelical Christian from Wisconsin, and I was an election observer for the Wisconsin Republicans in the 2020 election. As for our elections, we can trust U.S. election results because our judicial system works well, and it did work well for the 2020 election. Having said that, I believe that due to the pandemic, some decisions that were made pushed the boundaries of the law that impacted a significant number of votes in the 2020 election. Laws are sometimes vague or can be interpreted in different ways, so we must rely on our court systems to sort through those challenges. In my state of Wisconsin, our Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that Trump's team filed the lawsuits too late to try to throw out votes cast by ballot boxes and other contested means. The ruling was not about whether laws were broken or not, but rather, even if laws were broken, can the court remedy the situation by throwing out ballots that were cast in good faith? Although our justice system is not perfect and some people didn't agree with the ruling, we still need to respect its rulings and only use legal means to change and improve our system of government. It does matter when someone files an election-related lawsuit because Trump's campaign would not have filed the complaint after the election if Trump had won. They are only complaining because Trump lost and requested the courts to throw out voter ballots which were cast in good faith. I also want to share that a highly respected conservative law firm called Will conducted a comprehensive audit and confirmed that no widespread voter or election fraud was found, reaffirming that Biden won Wisconsin. In fact, the Wall Street Journal cited Will's report in their editorial board's best summary of the 2020 election with the subtitle, "Rules Were Bent, Republican Voters Defected, and Real Fraud Hasn't Turned Up." This post-election audit by Will is further reason to trust Wisconsin elections. At the national level, some of the most widespread stolen election fraud claims came out of the 2000 Mules documentary. For those who don't know, the 2000 Mules documentary was circulated far and wide in our conservative circles. Tangle News posted the most comprehensive analysis of this documentary. When I've shared Tangle's analysis with others, it actually made a difference in helping change some minds about the stolen election. Filtering fraud claims through our judicial system will ensure that bad faith arguments will be exposed and good faith arguments resolved. In every lawsuit and investigation related to the 2000 Mules documentary, no widespread voter nor election fraud turned up. I think it is critical for Americans to separate Trump's personal problem from trust in the election results. Americans must weigh Trump's claims against what has been proven in a court of law. Regardless of who is announced the winner in November, we need to make sure another January 6th doesn't happen if Trump loses. And we need to make sure that the guardrails of our democratic republic hold if Trump wins. The 2020 election was an anomaly because of the worldwide pandemic. Post-election audits, recounts, and lawsuits confirmed Biden won. Things that happened in 2020, such as outside funding of our elections and unmonitored ballot boxes, aren't allowed in Wisconsin anymore. Additionally, the GOP has recruited a lot more poll workers for the 2024 election. If you know people who still don't trust elections, tell them to be part of the solution and become a poll worker to learn the process. In conclusion, our elections are trustworthy because our judicial court system still works well to fairly adjudicate disputes and incentivize compliance to the rule of law.
Wonderful. All right, let's give jazz hands for our brave first speaker. She also shared right before this that this was her first time speaking in our forum. So yeah, extra jazz hands. I'd now like to invite questions for the speaker. The way that you can ask a question is that you can raise your Zoom hand. And so that that entails finding the raise hand button, which will be down in the next to your, like down the row from your mute and video buttons. And if you raise your hand, I may call on you. When I call on you, you can unmute and ask your question to me. And I see some folks raising their visible hands. Because we have 7 screens worth of people here, I want to make sure that we do use Zoom hands, because otherwise I just won't see you all. And don't forget to ask your question to me. And then the one other thing I'll say is that questions should be up to about 30 seconds long, like shorter is fine. And there's about 1 minute to answer them. All right, let's start with Sherry. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Hi there. So I wanted to ask the speaker if she thinks that certain things were changed now may indicate a recognition there was a problem previously. So things that were previously for a 2020 timeline, for some reason, allowed the Zucker bucks, as you mentioned, quite a few of them. Just the fact that they've been changed may obviously indicate that that was an issue.
All right, go ahead and
right.
respond.
Yeah, so the questioner had a great question. And here in Wisconsin, I'll reference 2 things. So because she referenced the Zuckerbucks, we actually had a referendum that was proposed by our state legislature, who's Republican leaning. And we actually voted last month in April on whether or not to allow outside funding to our elections. And Wisconsin voters said no, to not allow it anymore. So previously law was unclear, right? So we are a state, the way that law works is if nothing is illegal, then everything, then it's fair game. And so because there wasn't a law against Zuckerbucks, it was legal. On the flip side, with the ballot boxes, that was a little bit different. In our state statute, it does talk about how the absentee how absentee votes should go from the voter to get to the clerk. And there were 2 ways through actually going to the clerk's office and dropping it off, and then or also through the U.S. Postal Service. So that one was a little bit more fuzzy, because if the clerk decides, hey, you can return ballot boxes to through a ballot box, so you can turn absentee ballots through a ballot box, and the clerk is saying that it's okay, so that was a little bit unclear whether or not it was allowed. And in the lawsuit that happened after the 2020 election, they did rule that they did push the boundaries and it should not have been allowed.
Thank
so
you.
Sorry for the long-winded answer, but
No, there was detail, I understand.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, so I think we'll take probably we'll have time for one more question. Mike, go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me. Oh, you're both named Mike. Sorry, there are 2 Mikes. We're gonna go with Mike N. Nykream, perhaps, last name.
Spacebar doesn't work. Oh, I thought it does. So the question we have, and actually coming from Washington State, where I've run for a state office twice, how do you trust any election process when there's zero accountability to the balloting system?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, well, I am not familiar with Washington State, but in terms of accountability, the ultimate accountability comes through voters, through voting, right? So if you don't feel like there is follow through on things, that's when the voters need to coalesce and make it an issue and vote to ensure that there's going to be accountability that comes through. And so that's, I guess, unfortunately, there's a lot that slips through in terms of accountability. I think a lot of people are frustrated, but voting is the best way.
All righty, and with that, the speaker is thanked. One more round of jazz hands. So we don't do responses. I see that you probably had other thoughts there. Our format, you just sort of, we do one question and one answer, but I know that probably things could go on for a while if we allowed all of the questions to come through. So we are now going to shift to a speech in the negative. By the way, for any new folks, as you may have noticed, we'd go affirmative, negative, affirmative, negative. And what I would say about that is just that if you have some things you want to say that don't fit naturally into either one, just pick one and raise your hand. Sorry, chat your whip. And that's totally welcome. Also, we're not strict about this. So with that, I'd like to call on our first speaker in the negative, Jack. Go ahead and unmute. You have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm putting my timer on. I'm going to try to go quick. So I want to get more questions here. But ultimately, Lena, I loved how you phrased that so well.
Got to address it to me.
Oh, sorry. I love the way the affirmative was mentioned. And, many experts in the media and academic experts, they tell us we have nothing to worry about. I want to believe that so badly. But the reality is, I made a living on Wall Street as a risk manager. My job was to find problems before they burnt the house down. So I have this training in me, and I see things that are just raising red flags and alarm bells that scream at me. And I'm not sure why there are so many people here who are so trusting. Let me just say a couple things. I want to stay focused here and be quick about it. The Heritage Foundation tracks and has an extensive election fraud database with over 1,500 proven cases of fraud, with most of those leading to criminal convictions. We know there's fraud out there. We know people are trying to do that. We know that there are a lot of races, especially local ones, that are very tight, and just a small number of fraudulent votes can change the difference. And we know how important that is. So I think dismissing the small number that we've caught and say, hey, it's just a small number, it's meaningless, is like looking at the tip of an iceberg and ignoring it because it's just a small chunk of ice. I think we should all be alarmed. And from a risk management perspective, my concerns are simple. Hey, we need to recognize the potential for this to be much bigger than what we're catching. If some got through, how do we know the extent of what else is getting through? We shouldn't have anything getting through that's fraudulent, one. And two, what concerns me very much is the lack of standard operating procedures that we have across all the states that will control and safeguard that vote. We have all these different states doing different things. And it's very, very concerning when you have a state like Virginia recently saying they're not going to allow audits because it's going to be time consuming and it might mess up their ability to report results on time, taking precedent over the actual security and trust. And I think it's a serious problem. We have 5 states that do voting entirely by mail. And of course, no fraud was detected. That doesn't mean there was no fraud. It just means it's hard to detect, and there wasn't detected. But we know the bad guys are out there. We should all be worried. We should have standard procedures. We should have it tight, and we should safeguard that vote because that vote is the basis, fundamental basis of our democracy. If you can't trust the vote, you can't trust the democracy.
All right, fantastic. Jazz hands for our brave first negative speaker. Thank you. And questions for the speaker. I see that several folks have already gotten in line. So let's start with the cat man, Mr. Phillips. Go ahead and unmute. Ask your question to me.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The speaker mentioned, or the speaker referenced the variety of different voting systems and different ways to vote in the American system in different states and localities and stuff as being something that makes it harder to keep general accountability. And I'm sure he has complicated thoughts on how those voting systems should be maintained, but I'm wondering like how much he thinks the local autonomy of states and municipalities should be kind of controlled from national legislation in the interest of keeping things under control, so to speak.
All right, great. Go ahead.
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. So I will just say this: it's very, very important that we have a decentralized state-run system, right? We don't have one central person who is making the rules and can slip in some kind of easy way to control the result, right? However, although you have 50 states being administrators, we have to have a standard protocol. When you drive, red means stop and green means go in all 50 states. And sure, you can have your own traffic rules in different states, but red means stop. And we have to, we find the best rules, the safest way of doing things, and 50 different states will then execute that agreed upon by experts as the best, safest way to protect our most valuable asset, the vote, to the greatest democracy on the planet. That's an example of so many other people.
All right, fantastic. Let's go to Bethany. Go ahead and unmute. Ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, just a question for the speaker on the Heritage Foundation finding 1,500 cases of fraudulent votes. Over what period of time was this, and how many potential votes in total were there at that period of time?
All right.
Wow, fantastic, Bethany. You must be a math person. And I know I'm not supposed to address her, but speaker, that was a great question. The good thing is that it dates back over 50 years. They have this database. And on a percentage terms, the media is correct. All the speakers who are saying we have nothing to worry about here, look away, look away. They're right. On a number basis, it's a fraction of a percent. But we see how close Georgia was. And on the local races, some races have been overturned because they're within 10 votes, and they found a dozen bad votes that shouldn't be there for a lot of reasons. People have passed away. We're not doing cross-state checks between people who just moved and are registered in multiple places. There are things that are no-brainers. That's common sense that we ought to be doing. And if we don't do that, and you don't know what you're not catching. That's my message tonight. Yes, the numbers are small and they're easy when someone tells you, hey, they're so small, it doesn't matter. But look, when Arizona does a recount and they find out that Biden's actually, after we counted this again in this automated foolproof system, Biden gained 99 points actually, and Trump lost 261. Every alarm bell should go off in all of your minds. Wait a minute, how does a computer make a mistake like that? And how are we not able to replicate that result? If we count it again, are we going to get a completely different result? How do we trust this? Why is there any variance between the report and the audit? Like, that should be reconciled. The systemic reason for that break should be addressed on a process level. Because today it might have been 200 votes, if that's even accurate. It could be 200,000. We have no idea. Right. Everyone should be concerned.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up. Yep.
I'm done. Yeah, thanks. Sorry. I was passionate about control.
I can tell. It's great. Just want to make sure we get in as many questions as possible. So let's go to, I don't know if it's Arend. Your middle name is Peter. I know how to say that. But yeah, unmute, ask your question to me.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Arend.
Arend.
For the previous speaker, I heard him mention vote by mail. I was wondering if he could briefly or elaborate on that of how has vote by mail been good or bad for our overall security and reliability, and is that something that the previous speaker believes can be remedied?
Great. Go ahead.
Another fantastic question. I'm just, before I say anything to that, because I don't feel authorized, if there's anybody here who's works for the election boards and has an answer, chime in when this is over with that. But here's what my concern is. It makes mail-in votes is super convenient. We did this in Utah. When I lived in Utah, I loved it. The problem is, there's a lot of homeless people, and there's a lot of people who are registered at shelters. When there's addresses that a lot of people share the same address, it's very easy to submit an extra 20, 50, 100 votes. And that is a problem on local elections when things are really tight. So sure, mail-in, and the problem is no instances of fraud have been detected. Well, of course not. How are you going to detect it? You're not trying. There's no audit. It just comes in the mail and you count it. Of course, nothing was detected. That should not give you comfort that nothing was detected or there's a low percentage. The process is what we need to trust. It's all about the process.
Spectacular. All right. We're gonna do, if we can, because you gave a noticeably short speech for this purpose. We're gonna do one final question, but short question, short answer.
Okay.
So let's go. Andrew, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for the speaker is that he mentioned in his original talk how trust in the election, the voting system is foundational to democracy. And my question is, if we don't know definitively whether or not fraud has altered the outcome of the election, should we tell people that they should not trust the outcome of the election?
Oh, fantastic question. The quick answer would be, heck no, you undermine the entire nature of democracy. You're going to have riots in the street. Well, what's the alternative? January 6th? We have to do the best we can, best controls we have, and continuous improvement is the takeaway here. The moral of the story, we got what you got is pretty good. You heard from poll workers here, but we could do better, and we need to do better. It is the most valuable asset we have.
All right. And with that, the speaker and questioners are thanked. Great questions and great answers. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we will now move along to our next speaker in the affirmative. Helena, go ahead and unmute. You have 4 minutes.
Hi, this is so much fun. I really enjoy thinking people all over the country. It's great. I came from a very strong Democratic family, 5 kids and 2 very active parents. We talk politics at the table all of the time. My mom was born in 1925 and talked often about how just 5 years after she was able to vote, she's glad she wasn't born earlier. But she was so frustrated with the fact that so few people in our country vote across, in so many elections. State, local, territorial officials work around the year to prepare for, all the local elections, for the national elections. I've been a poll worker. It's a lot of hard work, and everybody I've met within the system is very serious about their job. The decentralization with the states makes it a little more complicated, but as a previous speaker said, we do have at least a few red lights there, and maybe we need more red lights so that we have a little more commonality. Some states you can turn on that red light and some you can't, but we have a lot of commonality in the basics. But the process of authenticating and counting ballots depends on whether you vote in person, mail, at home, or absentee. You're feeding your ballot directly into a machine for in-person voters. There's central tabulators at the election administration office. There are multiple layers of security in place to verify the identity of voters. And yes, people do slip by who shouldn't be voting from 2 different states or things like that. And that is something that we need to, I agree with the previous speaker, we need to keep working on those security things. But the essence of trusting elections in our country, I think, is so essential to our continued governance. And there are already too many people who don't believe there's any value even in voting and don't even really care whether it's trusted or not trusted. They're just like, why bother? And I think that's the weakest link. If we have, close to 100% voting, there's less room for error. when you have a local election and only 30% of the voting population votes, you're going to have more opportunity for mistakes and error than you are in a much, much larger number to assure, who the winner is. And, trust in elections is a psychological construct, and then the trustworthiness of election results is illegal. And we have really been beating the don't trust our elections, and then don't trust our politicians, and don't trust our government. We have a fabulous government, and we all can participate. And I actually get rather frustrated with a number of the people over the years who've said we can't trust the government. They're the ones not voting. Well, do something, run for office, be a poll worker, or, volunteer to help with a campaign. And, you might think differently. And an interesting fact that I read is actually trust is increasing in elections right now, but it's but the polarization is increasing with Republicans less trustworthy, but Democrats are more trustworthy. So hopefully
30 seconds. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, I will wrap it up. So I'll just wrap it up and say, I trust the elections. I had timed this so well, but obviously I missed a few minutes. Thank you.
Great job. You didn't. I was trying to give you a 30-second warning. So
that's all right. That's all right. There wasn't a whole lot, left. I just think public trust in elections is critical to our democracy. It is essential. If we all start saying, why bother, then anyone can take over.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Well done. All right. So I'm now looking for questions for the speaker. I see one early bird. Mr. Wiley, go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is William Wiley. I'm a combat veteran. I've been a Republican since I was 21 years old back in the 60s. And if just people talk about, that there is too many bad voters or too many votes that aren't right. I believe in factcheck.org, and factcheck.org said in the 2020 election, 1/10,000th of the votes were not correct. And I would submit that perfect is the enemy of good. We can continue to strive and do that.
Question, right?
Right. So and the question is, if the last speaker, does she think that the four most important things are one vote for one citizen, independent Senate, House, presidency, and Supreme Court, states' rights versus federal, and the last one, which is very apropos now, peaceful transfer of power?
All right. It's a complex question. Go ahead, Helena.
Yes, I'll see if I can remember all. Madam Speaker, I do believe in one vote, one person. My son is currently serving in the United States military and has been deployed twice. So thank you for your service. But I definitely believe in one vote, one person. I'll throw in that I do not like the Electoral College because that is not one vote, one person. And that has room, I think, for problems, as we have seen. And I really think we should all be having our one vote count for presidency. I'm not quite sure I understood the question about the separate Senate, Supreme Court, and the House. I mean, I think our method of government is messy, but it is, to me, the one that will most successfully, as it continues to evolve, serve all of us.
All right, great. Further questions? Cheryl, go ahead and unmute. Ask your question to me.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I would like to question the fact that when the speaker was talking about the percentage of people that are deciding not to vote because they do not trust the system, one of the things that I have been finding is that our voter rolls to begin with are so inflated with bad names and bad situations that truly the percentage of people voting is distorted, because truly the people that are, the number of people that supposedly are registered are so wrong in our, in specifically our particular county. We have found thousands and thousands of bad registrations. And some of these bad registrations, or many of them, are voting. So who is voting those? And that's when it becomes a very huge issue of trust.
Like to ask you to come to your question? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the question is, how do you account for if the information to start with is bad and people are allowed to vote under false names?
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, yes, there may be many in many areas voters that are registered that shouldn't be registered for various different reasons. They're no longer alive or otherwise, but the overall numbers of the percentage of people that vote in elections throughout this country, with usually the highest is presidential, but when you do all the local ones where things really matter on the local basis to your own life, it's appalling. There's going to have to be a lot of mistakes in order to indicate that the percentage is because of bad names on there. It's just, I mean, in India, I think it is, they have 90% voting. That's a lot of people. So the very poorest people can still shack up against a office building and use the electricity because they go and vote and they can't make a law against it. You can control, not control, we have such influence over our lives by voting. And I think if all the people who could vote would vote. And it's not just trust, it's a lot of like, nothing changes anyway kind of attitude.
Mm-hmm. All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Excellent questions and excellent answers. Yes. Also, probably all have noticed that most of the time there are more questions than we have time for, and there will probably also be more speeches than we have time for. We're going to do our best to get as many people in as possible, but yeah, unfortunately, we will have to keep moving fairly quickly. So I'd like to go to our last pre-planned speaker. And so I say this because if you're someone else and you're like thinking about that you might have something you want to say, particularly if you're a person who doesn't usually speak at this kind of thing, I would say consider chatting your whip. Really any of the whips, but if you can find the one that fits your correct alphabet letter, that's ideal. Just give it a try. And we will open up to non-planned speakers right after this. So I would like to go ahead and call on our next negative speech from Barbara. Go ahead, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've noticed that we all focus on just the end point, voting day, of an incredibly long process. One of the questions, at least, how do voters register? But this process starts well before Election Day. And there are problems with the entire process. For example, right now, somewhere around 70% of Americans do not want a Trump-Biden rematch. The Americans are clear on that. And our politicians, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to give people what they don't want at the very start. Mm-hmm. So does my vote count when I can't even vote for a person that I consider a viable candidate? This is an issue. The millennials particularly appear to be extremely angry about their choices. My daughter's a millennial, and she and her friends complain that, my goodness, neither of the people that appear on my ballot are a proper choice. They're ugly people. They're not leadership material. And in fact, they refused to vote, and I couldn't come up with a good argument to tell them why until last year. They got so annoyed with one of the local politicians that they went out to vote against him. The other guy wasn't good, but one of their politicians had become so bad that they just needed to go out and randomly vote for anybody else on the ballot. This is not what we want in a democracy. Somebody talked about the electoral college, but part of the problem is gerrymandering. where states aren't even up for grabs, because guess what? We've painted our districts so that we don't even bother running two parties in many districts anymore. If I look at my ballots when I was in Houston, many of them only had one party running because their little district didn't even have a half dozen folks in the other party. This is not something that will give us confidence in our elections. The nomination process turns out to be a problem. We've had cases, I also come from Wisconsin, and we've had a couple of cases here where people tried to run against an extremely unpopular incumbent in a one-party district, and the national folks came in with a lot of money to essentially prevent people running against this unpopular person in the primary. Now, this is not going to give confidence in election results, is it? So what I'm saying is we can only have confidence in our elections if we actually have a process that we consider fair, equitable, and that offers us candidates that we consider valid leadership material. With the influence of money, and particularly corporate money and Citizens United, that isn't happening anymore. We're finding millions, hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from out of state. For example, in Wisconsin, our last Supreme Court election came in from with money from out of state trying to influence it. This is not what we want for if we really want to trust our elections. We need a better process, end to end.
All right.
Thank you, Madam. Sorry.
Yes, with that, let's give some jazz hands to our fabulous final docketed speaker. I am now looking for questions. All right. Let's start with, I'm going to call you the other Mike, Michael Motes. Go ahead from earlier, please. Also, just to say this, because I just said from earlier, questions only get asked to the person who just gave a speech, just so that everybody knows. All right, go ahead. We're not hearing you yet.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, the speaker was talking about what Trump stole the word, but deep state, if you will. I mean, there's a culture of politician out there, and I think what the speaker was referring to, who run to become politicians and they run for office's sake, right? And when you talk about distrusting elections and the people who are in them, that's part of it, because you feel like your vote doesn't count. So I guess my primary question, and also it's a plea, like, well, I'm from Ohio, and in our smaller county, we had to become precinct leaders, right? We had to become active within our local political party because our county party feeds to the state party, which feeds to these endorsements, which feeds to the deep state. So I guess my question is, I guess my request would be to talk to millennials and talk to these younger people to become more politically active.
Can you phrase that as a question?
Yeah, I mean, so is there any energy in the millennials, to become more politically active in that direction? Because I'm afraid that's the way to go.
Right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I wouldn't use the term deep state because I think it's a loaded term that's not very meaningful. My term is people on a ballot that appear to have no leadership potential to the average person who then is not going to vote. When I was younger, I did work with elections, and I think it was valuable, and I did feel that it made a difference. I would love to see more young people involved, but I also understand, I mean, I'm 70 and I look up and go at these elderly people who are running the Senate, running the for president, and wonder, you know, what are we thinking? I mean, I'm not sure I would have the stamina to do this job. So I also think maybe my generation needs to consider giving up some of its power grabbing and offer more to the millennials.
All right. And I'd like to take our next question from, I'm guessing, but this will be a compliment, from a bona fide young person, Michael, or millennial. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Sure. Is that Michael Friend? There's
Michael Friend.
lots of us around.
Sorry, so
Okay.
much
Is
Michaels.
that, make sure.
Friend, you.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Chair, I'm wondering what are some methods for people to engage with the electoral process that the last speaker might recommend to help us remedy some of these issues?
Yep, go ahead.
I think you need to get involved at the local level. And I think people have mentioned becoming a poll watcher, becoming a candidate, helping a local candidate. You know, all of those things I did when I was your age. And I'll have to say, I had much more confidence in the election process when I was so intimately involved in it when I was younger. And I think the first speaker from Wisconsin said the same thing. You know, she was at the polls and was able to see what was going on. So encouraging young people to get involved is a really important thing that probably those of us who are older need to do. We need to give up a little bit of our power hungry stance, I think, and let the next generation take over.
All right, we'll take one final short question from that other Wisconsinian. Lena, go ahead. Short question, short answer.
Excellent. Well, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the last speaker, Barbara Brown, if she has heard that Wisconsin actually has legislation called Final Five voting. And we had hearings in both chambers, and it is designed to give 5 choices in the general election, not just 2. And this would help depolarize and give more options and hopefully encourage more people to come out and vote, and for candidates to come out because they might have a fighting chance, because in the general election, you would use an instant runoff. So there would be no spoiler counts. Has the speaker heard of Final Five voting?
Not in Wisconsin. I'll have to say I moved here from Texas, and I've only recently re-registered. I grew up in Wisconsin, but only recently re-registered. I think any kind of proportional voting. I personally, I love the idea of none of the above on every single candidate, right? I mean, I'm sorry that there are a couple of, I've heard my millennial kids go, you know, Mickey Mouse would be a better choice. And it makes me cry to think that they've gotten so untrusting of what's happening. So I do think things like having a none of the above, getting rid of the partisan primaries and allowing more than 2 folks in the or even often in gerrymandered areas, more than 1 person on the ballot would be a really big step forward.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for excellent questions and excellent answers once again. So I'd now like to call on Chris Newland from one of our sponsor organizations, Team Democracy. Chris, you are the next affirmative speech. Go ahead and unmute, and you have 4 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and it's wonderful to be able to participate in this discussion. I find that I'm agreeing with most of the speakers already, and I have some prepared talks, but I think they align with what people are saying. I believe, as you said, I believe we can and should trust the U.S. electoral system. The electoral system is the cornerstone of any healthy democratic republic. It's the way that people hold elected officials accountable. Studies in the US and elsewhere show that trust in elections predicts whether a person votes and even whether they decide to participate in politics in other ways, such as attending peaceful demonstrations or discussing politics with others. If people don't think that elections are fair or trustworthy, then they don't see the point in taking steps that maintain our republic. They also have less confidence in their leaders, as other speakers have called out, and can be more prone to violence, as we have seen in the past. So trust is immensely important for our elections, and as everyone on this call is aware, there's a crisis in trust now. Let's concede first that our elections are not perfect. They never have been. Churchill famously said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. Indeed, at our founding, our elections excluded well over half of citizens from participation. In the 1800s, democratic machines in major cities were known to stuff vote ballot boxes with reams of ballots pre-printed with approval slates of candidates. We could spend this whole 2 hours discussing times our elections have been tainted by fraud by members of the different parties and still just scratch the surface. But despite these issues, our electoral system regularly passes the most fundamental test for a republic. Can contested elections lead to a change in leadership with a peaceful transfer of power? Since 1960, over half the presidential elections have resulted in change in the ruling party. A quarter of the time, an incumbent president lost. The House and Senate have frequently switched parties. We see similar things occurring at the state and local level. New York City is no longer under the control of the corrupt Tammany Hall politicians and regularly elects Republicans, Democrats, and independents as its mayor. We see very liberal states with Republican governors and conservative states with Democratic governors. Our system has shown the ability to adapt and continuously improve itself, from amendments and laws that brought the right to vote for everyone to the brave actions of individuals and a free press that exposed political corruption. We should trust our electoral system, but as Ronald Reagan might advise us, we should trust but verify. To properly verify our electoral processes, it is important that we understand and adhere to nonpartisan principles of trusted elections: an honest process, a civil campaign, secure voting, responsible oversight, and trusted outcomes, and insist that our elected officials do the same. We should also positively engage in our country's political life, whether that's volunteering as a poll worker or working to improve our electoral processes. We have all benefited from the work of generations of Americans before us. In conclusion, in the history of mankind, we have the rare privilege of living in a republic that has electoral processes that give us the power to choose our leaders. We should trust those processes, however imperfect they are, so we can keep it.
All right. Jazz hands for both this speaker and for Team Democracy. All right. I also just love that Churchill quote. All right, questions for the speaker. Donna, go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Hello, Madam Chair. My question is, with all the stuff that's going on with the elections and mail-in ballots, how can we prevent people from having multiple ballots being sent to them in the mail, in particular, with different names or names that have been written incorrectly? Because I know me personally, I have received different ones in the past with my name incorrectly stated on there. So how can we prevent that from happening in the future so that we can make sure that our elections are more precise?
Right, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. To the questioners and to answer the questioners, as a prior speaker pointed out, each state has its own processes on processing the ballots of mail-in ballots. Some of them refuse, are limited on what they do. I know I've had discussions with friends on this. It's important to look into how your state does it. And what usually, as you look into it, you find that there are secure, like in North Carolina, where I live, there are very secure processes that ensure there's only one ballot per person. And when I go and I submit a mail-in ballot, that slot, nobody else can submit a mail-in ballot for me. I can check online whether I submitted it or not. So so it depends, but generally, states like Utah or Washington that do all mail-in ballots, they have focused on how they make it secure, that they make sure that there's just one vote per person. And these are all things that, have to be looked at. As a prior speaker said, we should always continuously look at how we can improve things. But the technology and our ability to monitor things has greatly improved over the years.
All right, excellent. For our next question, we will go to Mr. Phillips. Go ahead and unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the speaker mentioned the defeat of old-fashioned political machines like Tammany Hall in New York as an advancement for democracy, and I take his point. I'm wondering, however, how he assesses the old argument that machines like Tammany Hall and the dailies in Chicago and their equivalents in other places around the country are more effective at various public works and other policy delivery, and also at representing political communities that are not normally very mobilized on their own terms.
All right.
Thank you. Madam Chair, as I understand the question is that essentially the assertion on this is that these machines are getting more sophisticated in a way on how they do stuff, and they do, and it evolves. And it becomes, what's happened over the years, though, is that we've gotten better at how we monitor things. We've gotten better with the technology, and, there's awareness. We have things that people film stuff. We see, you're able to instantly through social media communicate. There's a downside to that, but it allows this transparency that we haven't had in the past. I went through the 1968 election, is something I'd like to think about, where essentially we had the presidential candidate on the Democrat side won 0 primaries. The one who was in the lead got shot. And you would feel as a young person at that time that, hey, your vote didn't count. It wasn't trust. So there's always been this issue. It's just things have evolved on our understanding, and we've refined our processes. We still have some distance to go, and I'm not suggesting we don't have ways to improve it. And that's a lot of these people, whether it's the final 5 voting or various other ways we can get better at that.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands once again. Yes, bravo. Well done, everybody. All right, so we're now going to move to a speech in the negative, undocketed speech, and we're going to go to the name of the night is Mike Nakrim. Go ahead, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah, I don't need 4 minutes. It's really simple. How can anybody trust a system, especially our election system, especially here in Washington State, that has no accountability?
All right. It is permitted to make 1-sentence speeches, and so I actually see a number of questions for you. So great. We will go to questions, and let's start with Ed Hart. You've had your hand up a number of times. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like, if possible, to hear more specifics. I'm not familiar with Washington State and what specifically and how specifically there is no accountability. I find that difficult to believe, but I'm willing to listen to the arguments and the specifics. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Go ahead.
Oh, Chair, do I respond? Is that correct? Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to be really clear here. I do not believe in one vote for one person. That's not how our nation is to work. I believe in one vote for each citizen, and each citizen that can be verified that they're actually a resident and actually a citizen. We do not have that here in Washington State. We have no voter ID. We have there's no method of accounting for where a vote goes and where it ends up. Okay. We have no residence ID here in Washington State. We have no citizen check ID here in Washington State. We have no ballot accountability. Our state mails out, we'll mail out more ballots than there are actually voters in a particular county. We have no 24/7 security in what's called our drop boxes. They can easily be broken into. I have actually run for state office twice, in 2020 and 2022. So I've experienced this personally. I've actually been on the legislative chair in my legislature. I've watched a close election, and a recount was nothing more than being allowed to look at a computer screen that claimed on how votes were so-called overcounted. We are not allowed to ever see a ballot after it's initiated. Not one court case that we have brought has ever been allowed to be heard based on its merits. They've only been thrown out based on procedural errors, not one on its merits. I've actually put together a website with accountability, point-by-point data points on breaches, fraud, massive database losses. It's called electionintegritywa.org. So just election integrity, wa.org. You can go to it. I have dozens of instances of fraud. We have proven where the state of Washington buys election machines and they are Wi-Fi enabled, documented. In 2020, we had $1 billion stolen from our state's computers. And since we can't trust our state's computers to keep our money safe, why can we trust our vote to be safe? Trust is not a system. Now, I run a couple of multi-million-dollar companies, and for those of us that work in the realm of 7 figures plus, where we sign personally for those kind of companies like I do, especially what happened today in New York, can happen to any business owner in this nation. Those last 3 trials against Trump, and I've read them all, that can happen to me. That can happen to every single business owner across this nation. And I'm telling you folks right now, I've read a lot about U.S. history, how we got in the Revolutionary War, how we got in the Civil War. I thought we were in 1859. As in today, we're in 1860.
All right, we're going to do, as you might have guessed, a few more questions because that was such a short speech. I'd like to go to Jack. Go ahead and unmute. Ask your question to me.
Oh, hey, Madam Chair. I think is that me?
Sorry, Jack Renaud. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was very powerful, and I think there's so many things that I could say, and I think one of the things that we have to do, one of the things I want everyone here to know, and especially someone who feels like you feel, and there's a lot of points that I agree that, there's a major cases that we have to go after. What happened in Georgia, and instead we're talking about valuing the brand of Trump and did he overstate what he thinks Trump is worth. Yeah, the courts are being abused. Now people don't trust the Supreme Court. We don't trust our healthcare. We have a crisis of trust. So that people should be aware that, we got problems here. And when there are problems,
remind you that this does have to be a question, but at the end.
Sorry. Okay. So when we have problems, I think we have to double down, right? So in terms of what we controls. So what would you say?
What would he
would
say?
work for you? What would the speaker? Yes. What would the speaker love to see to restore some of that trust and confidence from our leaders and our courts?
So I lived in a state where we did at one time have 100% voter accountability. And I don't have a problem with mail-in balloting as long as every single ballot can be accounted for. But that's not what we have here. Ballots are just thrown out across the board, literally thrown out. You can print your own ballot off this printer that sits right behind me, and somehow that is valid? No. So we need to go back to a point where every ballot can be accounted for, and every person that votes, they too have to show some level of ID before they're handed a ballot. So folks, trust is not a system. The IRS doesn't trust me. I have to prove myself to the IRS, okay? I just went through a business audit with my insurance company earlier this week. I'm sorry, they don't trust me. And guess what? The reason why people don't trust the system now, more and more, there's no accountability. And more people are seeing it. And so the fraudulent system here in the state of Washington and other mail-in ballots affects our whole nation. We are not a blue state. I have knocked on thousands of doors. Thousands of doors, all right? And I go across thousands of doors, and then I find this many people who tell me they're not going to vote for me. And yet I lose elections 30 to 70. Something's wrong. Something is serious wrong.
All righty. And with that, the speaker is thanked. And I know there are so many more questions. Don't forget, questions can be speeches, and there will be other opportunities. So I'd now like to call on our next affirmative speaker, Jesse Waters. Go ahead and unmute. You have 4 minutes.
What a time to be alive, huh, folks? And what an amazing evening on which to hold this kind of event. I'm so glad to be able to join all you good and gentle American citizens. I find myself wondering not so much if our elections can be trusted, but what does it look like to trust an election? And do we really truly want to trust our elections? As so many people, my good and gentle colleagues here have already pointed out, we have issues of gerrymandering, issues of the Electoral College. There's the corporatization of potential elected and post-elected officials. There's the fusing of all candidates into this bipartisan system. I mean, it's almost as if asking, do you believe in cake? Well, yeah, I mean, of course I do. I can point to it, but do I like it? Will I eat it? Will it make me fat? Does it have too much sugar? Should it have had chocolate instead of strawberry? I mean, it is such a complex thing to try to wrap one's hands around in terms of this umbrella that I find it wonderful to debate this kind of issue, because again, there are so many things that we as Americans have to consider within this model. And the reason why I bring up that question, do we want to trust our elections? As has been pointed out about the Chicago news machines of the past, Tammany Hall, this country is steeped in a rich tradition of corrupt elections. This is what has made the country what it is from its very beginning. And so to now find ourselves in the 21st century wrapped up in a situation in which the two major news organizations of this country have fiercely aligned themselves to one of those areas of partisanship. And you then connect that with the fact that social media has empowered every citizen to feel as if they have equity in their voice as it is broadcast across the atmosphere. You're really talking about an incredibly complex issue. And I would like to offer an anecdote, which may seem a little digressive at first, but I really think it does connect here. I'm sure many of us here are NFL football fans. And for those of you who may not be football fans or who may not know what a first down is, there is a method for measuring whether a team can then advance the ball, which is a physical system of two referees using a pole that is connected between one line that is 10 yards long, which they then use. They use their human sensibility to eye whether or not the ball has moved far enough to achieve for that team the ability to move forward. And for decades, people have said, why are we doing this? You can simply put a sensor in the football. You can take the human element out of this feature so that we absolutely know whether a first down has occurred or not. And the NFL, the league commissioners, the judicious nature of the NFL has consistently rejected this proposal. I suggest that there is something in our human id that is very attracted to the issuance of human error, and that there's something within us that I don't know as a culture would be completely satisfied with an airtight system. I truly believe that. And the reason why is because, as many of us have tonight, we have used that collective pronoun we. Well, there ain't no we in this country, folks. There are so many different we's that when you look at one particular group and how they define an honest election as opposed to another group and then another group and another group, really trying to ferret out whether these elections are truly honest or not really kind of becomes an exercise in futility.
About 10
That
seconds.
being said, I would refer back to the Churchill quote, because I am here speaking on the pro, and I do think our elections can be trusted.
All right. Questions for the speaker? Let's give some jazz hands. Yes, absolutely. I have to say, I'm loving this debate. Great job, everybody. Let's go to Bethany. Go ahead and unmute. Ask your question to me. Bethany Putnam.
Yes, I'm here, but I had forgotten to take my hand down from before. So
Oh,
move
great. Excellent. No worries. Let's go to the speaker immediately prior, Mike Nycream. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Oh, where's my screen? Okay, you can hear me. Yeah, so Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the speaker, why doesn't the IRS trust him?
Repeat that, please.
Yeah.
Why doesn't the IRS trust you? I mean, why doesn't the bank trust you?
The speaker.
I mean, I tell you what.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second.
I'm
You've
sorry,
got to
to
ask
the
it in
chair.
third person. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little bit out of protocol, but we just went through a horrendous bank.
Okay, what is the question?
Oh, nope. Sorry, we're not going to do
question.
that.
Yeah, sure. So, Madam Chair, the question I'd like to ask is, if the speaker is saying that trust is a system, then why is that system not used with any other entity that has any financial aspect to it whatsoever?
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know.
All right.
I mean, first of all, I never said the system is based on trust. I mean, elections based on trust? No. I mean, that's why we have so much convoluted systemic nature within our elections, the way that they're corporatized, the way that they're absolutely tied to money. You can't even run on a national scale unless you have millions and millions of dollars. So we're talking about a meritocracy at best that's been completely monopolized by economy. There's no trust in that. Elections are not about trust. Elections are about perception. And so when we then come back to the root of that question, can we trust elections? Well, can we trust perception? And one thing I would absolutely argue, and you can prove this, you can look at the qualitative and the quantitative data. When members of these two political parties, and you can prove this, you can do your own research, when one of those parties is asked, will you trust the results of the 2024 elections? Overwhelmingly, the members of that party say, yes, we will. The members of the other party say, if it's fair. That represents a huge dichotomy in this country that suggests that one of those parties is in a very passive-aggressive way saying, it hasn't been fair to us. So where is trust? Look under a rock.
All right, we will go to our next question. Mr. Craig Diamond, go ahead and unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the speaker, despite what he has said, if he feels there are some concrete things that can be done to make elections more trustworthy.
I believe absolutely. And they do not come from me. They come from my good acquaintance, former U.S. Representative Constance Morella. who tells all American citizens, you want veracity in your elections, get out and vote in the primaries. Be involved as much as you can in local elections. That's where your power is. That's where the beginning of citizenry and citizenship exists. Will that make elections trustworthy? Will they somehow validate them? I can't say for sure, but it is certainly working from the micro to the macro. And that, as I think our risk management individual would tell us, is the best way to minimize risk. I wanted to also, to speaking to that first speaker and their wonderful erudite information about risk management, I'm sure that speaker understands that no risk is without risk, that all risk management involves some degree of risk. So within our national elections, as a joint group of citizens, at what point can we all say we are satisfied with this level of risk? Because people are always going to try to make elections corrupt. Someone somewhere is always going to try to do it. But to come back to this particular question and to not digress, being involved at the local level and voting in primaries is the best way for our perceptions to be validated through the election process.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for excellent questions asked and answered. So we were going to move on to an affirmative speech in just 1 second, but I just want to take a minute and say that I love how much passion there is in this room, and I love that we are able to navigate it. So once again, well done, folks. This is one of the most interesting debates I've seen in quite a while. I'd like to go next to our next speech in the negative from Tom Cook. Go ahead and unmute. You have 4 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to speak kind of along the lines of what the other speaker said is perception. It plays a key role in the trust of our citizens in our election. And I'd like to just compare our elections, the state of our elections, to other countries, democratic countries. Now, I'm not talking about dictatorial or countries, but take Japan, for example. I was chatting with someone from there and asked them, did they make any changes to their election process for COVID? And the answer was no. They did not see, either they didn't see the necessity for it, or they thought it would introduce perceptions of a lack of trust, but they did not alter their election process like we did. And I look at, well, one of the speakers brought up India, but most of the countries that are not quite as advanced technically as we are with internet and connectivity, their citizens want to vote, and they make an effort to go and vote at the ballot location, at the voting location. And I remember this image of a lady in Peru. She looked like she was about 90 years old, and she was being helped out of a car to the polling place because she wanted to vote. And this was during COVID. And it was like a Peru soldier or something that was helping her make it into the place. And I just think about what other countries, now granted, they won't, most countries will not say negative things about our elections because we put ourselves up as the gold standard. But I think if you actually had people stand up and speak from those other countries, they would be concerned about the quality of the U.S. elections at this point in history. That's it.
Great. Jazz hands, yes. Thank you so much. Are there questions for the speaker? I'll also just let folks know that we're going to start, because the hour is growing late, we'll start reducing the number of questions, and in a few minutes we'll shorten speeches. But let's go ahead and Joe Pratt, go ahead and unmute, ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the speaker, what do you think is the primary reason that there's a perception that the 2020 elections were not trustworthy?
Right, go ahead.
Well, it goes along to the other previous speaker. You know, he talked about the chain measurement in football. I imagine if the public, and a lot of people watch it, were watching a game and they measured the distance, but they saw that there was a sag in the chain and they weren't pulling it tight. And they said, but this is the measurement. And everybody's yelling, but the chain isn't tight. They can see it's not tight. Well, in our 2020 election, we saw people dumping ballots into ballot boxes. Now, we were told they were legally allowed to do that. But to the average US citizen who's always voted, believed in one person, one vote, seeing someone drop 20 votes into a box damaged the perception of a trustful election in the United States of America.
All right, thank you so much. With that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands. Yep, great. And like I said, I know it's fewer questions, but it's just because of time. There are quite a few people who still want to speak. I'm going to try to get as many in as possible. We will next go to Annie from the Equal Vote Coalition. Annie Callan, please unmute. You have 4 minutes.
Hi, thank you very much. So I am Annie Callan. I'm the president of the Equal Vote Coalition, which is an organization that advocates for voting methods which provide an equally weighted vote. So I'm going to be speaking from that context. And this is going to seem like a tangent, but I promise I'm coming back around to election security. You may have heard of different voting methods like ranked choice voting. Somebody earlier today mentioned final 5 voting with instant runoff voting. That's also known as ranked choice voting. And we actually don't support ranked choice voting for reasons I'll get into in a minute. Our current voting method that we use right now is called plurality voting. Sometimes it's called first past the post. Sometimes it's called choose one voting. That's how most places in the US currently vote. At the Equal Vote Coalition, we advocate for other voting methods, which include star voting, approval voting, and Condorcet methods. So now that I've explained all that, I'll wrap back around to how this ties in with election security. With our current voting method, even though it has flaws, it causes vote splitting and it makes people feel like their vote's going to be wasted. It makes people feel like they shouldn't bother voting. There is actually one good thing about choose one voting, and that is that it can be tallied at precinct levels. So counties can tally the ballots at the county level and then send that data in batches to the central location, for example, state capital, or to Washington, D.C., and then those batches are aggregated and it's summed using math, summed using addition. So because of that, you have that transparency, you have that ability to see how each of those counties independently voted and make sure that it adds up and makes sense to how the larger country or the state voted as a whole. And so our concern is with ranked choice voting and it having been adopted in a few places around the country, and the ranked choice voting algorithm requires ballots to be tallied centrally. And as some speakers earlier today mentioned, centralized election tallying is dangerous. It reduces security. So we would like to keep elections summable at the precinct level with a voting method like star voting or approval voting to ensure that we maintain that local control maintain that local security. And if you want some examples of how ranked choice voting risks that security, you can see how in New York City, where they used ranked choice voting, there was a tallying error where they added 135,000 test ballots to the election, and it wasn't caught. And it wasn't caught by the election board. And the reason for that was probably has something to do with the fact that it is that centralized tallying, it's that single point of failure, and it makes it so that you don't have that transparency, you don't have the auditability as strongly as you do with better voting methods. So our current Choose One voting has a lot of problems, but one of the things that has going for it is that it does allow that independent local control of elections, and that mitigates any issues that you might have with fraud and whatnot, because you're not having that centralized control.
All right, and let's give some jazz hands to one of our sponsoring organizations and individuals. Thank you. And I'd like to know if we'll take one question. Riley, go ahead and unmute and ask your question to me.
Hello, Madam Chair. My question, well, I'll just mention that I also would prefer star voting to instant runoff or ranked choice voting. However, the one that's making some progress in the country is ranked choice voting, and a lot of other countries seem to handle it just fine. So my question is whether the speaker sees a risk that we might stick with our current really, really damaging system if we, pick away at some non-ideal aspects of ranked choice voting and don't let that succeed just because we wish that a different one would get the momentum that it doesn't have now, because that's a fear I have.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. So from my perspective, I feel that because of the flaws in ranked choice voting, we actually see a risk of backlash, and we're seeing ranked choice voting being banned in many states around the country. We're seeing a lot of people they see the flaws that it has, and it's not just security. There's other issues that it has where it can elect the candidate that wasn't preferred head-to-head overall, not infrequently, or I should say it's not super common, but it happens often enough that it shows up in real elections. And that combined with the lack of transparency and lack of security makes people not trust it. And so we are seeing this backlash now. And the unfortunate thing is that backlash sometimes sweeps up other voting methods in it. So, people say, oh, I don't trust ranked choice voting, and I don't trust anything that kind of smells like it. So my concern is actually the reverse. I fear that if we go down a path of a voting method that doesn't achieve all the things that it says it will, and at the same time reduces security, transparency, auditability, and all of these things in our elections, that it actually will hurt the whole voting method reform movement.
All right, great. With that, the speaker's thanked. Jazz hands once again, and thank you so much. So we're gonna make a shift now into shorter speeches. But before we do, we're actually gonna do a poll. So if our poll master, I think, there we go. That's it. You've got 1 minute, and everyone is invited to vote.
speaker. I would love to have seen it before. And after.
I totally hear that. We're not gonna say like don't interrupt right now, but you can send me chats that say things like that. Thank you. All right. We're gonna give you 5 more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. So I agree, a before and after actually would have been fascinating here. Maybe we can do that next time. So it looks like we're pretty evenly split on how concerned we are about the trustworthiness of elections. There's a slight bump for one, but it's very split here. What concerns us currently? Gerrymandering is highest. We also have fair and equal access to voting, and all of us, or rather, we're somewhat concerned about all of these things here. Oh, peaceful transfer of power. I didn't scroll down far enough, is also high on that list. And then, yeah, we definitely think Election Day should be a national holiday. So good to know. And so then the last thing we'll do before we get back to regularly scheduled programming in the form of speeches is we're going to hear 60 seconds about the work that each of our sponsoring organizations does. So Annie, if you would be willing to come back off mute, you have a minute to just share with us what y'all do.
Yeah, so as I said, we're the Equal Vote Coalition, and we advocate for voting methods that provide an equally weighted vote. Primarily, we advocate for star voting, which is a voting method where you score candidates on a scale of 0 to 5. Top 2 highest scoring candidates are finalists, and the finalist that's preferred by the most voters wins. And as I said, it uses addition, so you're able to sum it by precinct or by county, and so it maintains that transparency. And if you're interested in learning more about what we're doing, if you want to get involved with the movement, you can go to equal.vote or you can go to starvoting.org. And I just want to thank Braver Angels for hosting this event. It was very interesting. And I'm involved with my local Braver Angels chapter here in Portland, and I super appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I think it's really phenomenal and really important.
All right, spectacular. Yes, thank you so much for that. Love when folks are also local alliance members. That's amazing. And so now we will go to Team Democracy, Chris, and then, like I said, we'll go back to speeches. So Chris, tell us about Team Democracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Team Democracy's mission is to bring Americans together of all political perspectives around our shared commitment to the core democratic principles of our constitutional republic. We have 3 key initiatives. One I want to hawk a little bit today, but one is around trusted elections. We work with the Carter and Ford Centers on the 5 principles of trusted elections and getting a commitment from public officials, incumbents, everyone on that. If you want to sign up for that or look at it, that's at principledcandidates.org. We have a civics credentialing system we're getting to roll out, which essentially allows us through open digital badges to encourage deeper civic engagement in activities around civic learning, bridging the divides, trusted elections, and trusted information. And the last initiative is one we're just rolling out this summer. The first big event is coming up on June 9th. It's called Raft for America, Reuniting America by Fostering Trust. My partner and I are both whitewater enthusiasts. My partner has a 50-year whitewater rafting company. So we're bringing together, hosting red-blue pairs of Americans, governors, lawmakers, regular citizens on rafting adventures from coast to coast, and demonstrating that we can come together, have fun despite our differences. If you're interested and we are taking applications, you get a free trip if you're accepted. If you have somebody that's great that you want to match with, if you want to have a match, you can submit an application and we will try to match you with somebody on the trip. You go to raftforamerica.org and sign up there.
All right, thanks so much. Jazz hands, I super want to do that. Raft for America sounds great to me. Cool. All right, so we are now going into a sort of lightning round of speeches where each speech will have 2 minutes, and we will not do questions in between just for the sake of time. like I said, quite a few folks still want to speak, and I want to get as many folks in as possible. So for our next 2-minute speech in the negative, we will go to Sherry. Go ahead and unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot. So basically, I want to be totally open to humanity and humanness, and I want to believe our elections are great, but Ronald Reagan was right when he said trust but verify. So what are the 2 things I've worried about really over a decade? My 2 issues, voter rolls. Have you even heard of them? Did you realize that in 2023, LA County had to remove 1.5 million ineligible voters? This is in 2023, people. Virginia, 19,000. Wisconsin, we talked about a lot, had to remove like 100,000. Pennsylvania, 21,000. Michigan, 177,000 voters, all in 2023. That's staggering. And yet, my second problem, mail-out ballots. Those are being pushed in a lot of the same places. And let's be honest, mostly in blue states like California, Colorado, Hawaii. So the voter rolls are bad. And then you get this Christmas list and you send out to all these old people, you waste all those stamps, and maybe you risk trust in your election. So voter rolls, a big issue for me. There is no doubt that we have a major problem with that. And until that's fixed, I don't know what you can think about it. Again, want to be positive. Voter ID, second thing. Why is one party pushing against that voter ID? Are they trying to encourage people to not vote honestly as citizens? I know we've said things that I think are very racist to try to say, oh, certain people can't get voter ID. I know that you have to show voter ID to buy any alcohol, to stay in a hotel, to drive, to do all kinds of things. We can't. If you don't believe in voter ID, I have to ask you, how can I trust you on election trustworthiness? Okay, so those are my big 2 things. If everyone would come together and agree on fixing those 2 things, get those voter rolls true, don't mail out ballots when you don't have good voter rolls, and agree to voter ID, I think a lot of us would feel a lot better about it. That's my point of view.
All right. That the speaker's thanked. Jazz hands for that excellent model of a lightning speech. Thank you. So we're next going to go to Andrew Parkins. Go ahead and unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so first off, actually, I would like to point to a correction. It's, along the way, like various things have been said, and one person mentioned the idea where they were talking about trust and that elections are not based on trust. That's basically their statement. And I would like to break out elections into 3 separate things. So there's the counting and the calculation process of like determining the outcome of the election. And that doesn't really rely on trust. It's hopefully mechanical as much as possible. Then there's the validation, determining like, has there been fraud? And that doesn't rely on trust. Actually, you want a lot of skepticism. You want to actually assume there's a problem until you've proven to yourself there isn't. If that's a good validation process. But then the last step is the peaceful transfer of power. And that very much relies on the people trusting the outcome of the election and trusting that process approximates allowing for the will of the people to peacefully determine our new leader or our next leader. So now I have like both sides have legitimate concerns. Like we very much want to have a good system that determines that there isn't fraud taking place, and at the same time we definitely want the American people to trust in the system such that we can have a peaceful transfer of power, and those aren't mutually exclusive. There's actually 3 different stances that I've kind of heard debated here tonight. One is that we can trust the outcome and the validation process. The other is that we can trust the election, that we can't trust the validation process, but we can trust the outcome. And the third is that we can't trust the validation or the outcome. The first 2, I think, don't need to be like held as opposing. I think that I think most people would say that when taking those 2 stances, that we should actually invest in better validation. There's no harm in that. Like, I don't think anyone here is going to say, no, I don't want more validation. Like, no, go for it.
I am going to say that you're about out of time.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And so then I'll run the punchline.
If you want.
So my concern about blurring these lines is that now failing to delineate between trusting the outcome of election versus trusting the validation of the election leads to aggravating people's lack of trust in the system, and even leads to, like we see today, politicians largely undermining trust in the system, which is disturbing. And that's my point.
All right. Very good. With that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for another excellent lightning speech. There's a lot of content for 2 minutes. Okay, let's now go to our next speaker, who will be Donna Vasquez. Go ahead and unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Do we really want to know that there's no errors in our voting system? Yes, I, as a young mother of 5 children, I want to know that important votes, especially in the state of California, that affect me and my children are checked, double-checked, and triple-checked with no errors. Because if we do not do this, then we are subjecting ourselves to being held back from certain important educational, life-saving measures, etc., that were denied to my family and everyone else in California and in our nation. For me, this cannot be due to us deciding, hey, mistakes happen, and so we should ignore them because who cares? Especially in regards to votes for presidential elections, votes for higher food, rent, or bills, votes for certain systems for people of lower income in need. All these are very important for a lot of people. I think as a young person, we need to stand up and change the laws on voting that have not been working as well as people think they have. We as a nation need to be in control of what happens within our country, good or bad, in collusion with our government, to make a fair and safe nation for all. I feel as though many people do not care anymore what happens in our government and in our nation, and we cannot continue on like this. I feel like corruption is all around us here in California and possibly in other states of our nation.
All right, beautiful. With that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands. Yes. May braver angels embody that spirit. Our next speech will be a speech in the affirmative from Matt Grant. Go ahead and unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate all of the speeches from everyone tonight on both sides. I particularly liked the point from one of the previous speakers who mentioned, just that it's a little surprising to see how confident people, generally speaking, are in our election system. And it's I would have expected people to be more skeptical overall. I am again in the affirmative, so I do generally trust the election system. I was appreciative to hear someone bring up the trust but verify quote. I wanted to add another sort of management principle, which is disagree and commit. So I'm all in favor of a voracious disagreement and political campaigns on both sides, different strong views. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to accept the results. And this goes for both sides. At the end of the 2016 election, many Democrats came out and said, not my president. Conversely, at the end of the 2020 election, we all know what happened there. I don't think anyone's happy with those outcomes. And again, at the end of an election, you might not be happy. The person that you voted for might not have won. But at the end of the day, we have to all commit to the president of the United States, whoever that may be.
Right, very good. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands once again. Yep. And just due to the lateness of the hour, we have one more piece after this that's short. We're going to go to a final speech from 2 minutes from Alan Falk. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you so much. Glad to be snuck in here. Speaking in the negative, I see very little reason to trust our elections. A couple comments. If you're willing to tolerate any kind of error in elections, vote counting, may I ask you what error message, what error level are you willing to tolerate on your paycheck? The other one is, if you're worried about the Electoral College or the House of Representatives, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it recently, the number of electors who are sent to the Electoral College to cast votes is not dependent on how many registered voters or citizens they represent. It's based on how many people live in that area. Likewise, House of Representatives counts people, not legal citizens. So if I'm wrong, let me know, but that sure makes me worried. Now for the real speech. At the time of voting, the voter should be, here's a process that should eliminate virtually all errors in the system, but the system has to be changed. At the time of voting, the voter would be given a printout with a voter's key, randomly generated by the machine and automatically assigned to that particular voter and only that voter, plus a list of every candidate that the voters vote. So the voter could see any errors immediately where their votes went before they clicked on submit. Then the process would continue. After the vote count is complete and the election has been certified, every voter can log onto the electoral system, input that personal key, and immediately see a list of every recorded vote associated with their key. Comparing the list of votes on that screen with the list on their printout, they can immediately flag errors or discrepancies or approve the votes as having been tallied accurately. Without individual front-to-back verification and matching in a process something like that, any and all kinds of voter fraud can be inserted somewhere between the voter and the tally with no way of making such fraud visible. I think we've seen a lot of people comment about how easy it is to do that.
Last line, go ahead.
3 short paragraphs. As all of the personal keys can be matched to the voter rolls such that every voter who voted was eligible and no ineligible voters voted, that has been entered into the final tallies. Impossible to implement? No. Foolproof? Maybe. Better than today's system? Probably. Chances of being implemented in our lifetimes? Negligible. Too many people benefit from not having such a system in place. Thanks for listening.
Great. With that, the speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for our final speaker of the evening.